Did you know that Jupiter and Zeus are, in essence, the same god? That's right. Two names, two empires, but one deity that spans centuries and cultural boundaries. If this sounds strange to you, stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you. Roman mythology and Greek mythology are like distorted mirrors. They reflect the same characters, but with nuances that reveal much about the people who worshiped them. And understanding these differences and similarities is like opening a window into the heart of the civilizations that shaped the Western world. Imagine walking through the ruins of Rome and coming across a temple dedicated to Mars. You'd swear you were standing before Ares, the Greek god of war. But make no mistake, despite sharing attributes, Mars and Ares are not exactly the same. While Ares was seen by the Greeks as an impulsive and even unwanted god, Mars was celebrated by the Romans as a symbol of honor, discipline, and patriotism. This difference isn't just symbolic. It reveals how each culture viewed the role of war in its society. Have you ever been there? Thinking two things are the same, but then realizing that context changes everything? Roman mythology, unlike Greek mythology, did not arise from a poetic or philosophical tradition. It was constructed, adapted, and often strategically shaped to serve the interests of the state. The Romans didn't simply copy the Greek gods, they reshaped them, gave them new meanings, and fitted them into a political and social structure that reflected Roman values. Jupiter, for example, is the direct equivalent of Zeus, but with a more austere stance, more linked to authority and order. He is not just the king of the gods, he is the guardian of Roman law and morality. And it doesn't stop there. Venus and Aphrodite, Diana and Artemis, Mercury and Hermes. The list is long, and each pair reveals a fascinating layer of cultural fusion. The Romans had a knack for absorbing what worked in other cultures and transforming it into something of their own. This skill at syncretism wasn't just religious, it was a powerful tool of domination and integration. By incorporating the Greek gods, Rome not only appropriated a rich mythology, but also built bridges with the conquered peoples, facilitating their acceptance of Roman rule. What makes this comparison so compelling is realizing that behind the names and statues, there's a story of adaptation, power, and identity. Mythology isn't just a collection of fantastical stories, it's a reflection of a people's beliefs, fears, and aspirations. And when Rome decided to adopt the Greek gods, it wasn't just copying, it was reinterpreting, redefining, and in many cases, using these figures as instruments of imperial propaganda. Have you ever imagined what it would be like to live in a time when the gods were used to justify political decisions and military conquests? If you enjoy Roman history and classical mythology, and want to understand how these narratives have shaped the collective imagination for millennia, this video is for you. Together, we'll explore the key comparisons between Roman and Greek gods, understand how these fusions occurred, and what they reveal about the soul of each civilization. Prepare to delve into a universe where religion, politics, and culture intertwine in surprising ways. And now that you've glimpsed this connection between Jupiter and Zeus, between Rome and Greece, between copying and creation, it's time to delve deeper, because what follows will reveal details many people never noticed, and that could completely change the way you view ancient mythology. And as we unravel these layers of Roman and Greek mythology, perhaps you've already felt that spark of recognition, as if somehow these ancient stories still speak to today's world. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what resonated most with you so far. It could be a curiosity you'd never realized, a connection to something you've studied, or even a feeling these narratives awakened in you. Your experience is part of this journey, and sharing it helps create a community where knowledge isn't just transmitted, it's lived. By the way, if you're enjoying this journey through history and want to continue exploring the mysteries and strategies behind ancient Rome, give this video a like. It may seem like a simple gesture, but it shows that this content is valuable to you, and that makes all the difference in helping more people discover and connect with these stories. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of content, which, let's face it, isn't found everywhere. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Subscribing is like officially joining this circle of history explorers, people who don't settle for superficiality and want to understand what lies behind the great narratives that shape the world. This way, you won't miss future episodes and also help keep this exchange of ideas alive, transforming each video into a true conversation between lovers of Rome, mythology, and classical culture. Now that we're connected by these stories that span empires and centuries, let's move on. Because what follows will reveal how these gods, with different names but similar souls, were used as key pieces in a game much bigger than you can imagine. When Rome began expanding its borders and encountered the sophistication of Greek culture, something profound happened. It wasn't just a territorial conquest, it was a quiet absorption of ideas, symbols, and beliefs that would shape the soul of the empire. The Romans, practical and strategic by nature, realized that Greek mythology carried immense symbolic power, and instead of rejecting it, they decided to transform it. This decision wasn't random. It reveals a mindset of adaptation and mastery that goes far beyond religion. It's about how a civilization builds its identity from what it chooses to preserve or modify. The hidden truth behind Roman mythology is that it did not emerge as an original, spontaneous system. It was, in large part, a carefully crafted cultural fusion. Greek gods were renamed, reinterpreted, and fitted into a framework that reflected Roman values, discipline, order, civic duty. It was not just a matter of faith, but of political and social impact. Jupiter, for example, was not just the Roman Zeus. He was the ultimate symbol of authority, a reflection of the imperial structure itself. By adopting Zeus and transforming him into Jupiter, Rome not only absorbed a god, it molded him to represent the centralized power and stability the empire so valued. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process, full of strategic decisions and cultural revelations. The Romans didn't have the same attachment to poetic narrative as the Greeks. While Homer and Hesiod constructed myths with emotional depth and drama, Rome preferred functionality. The gods needed to serve clear purposes, protect the state, inspire soldiers, legitimize rulers. It was a mythology with political undercurrents, where each deity had a defined role in the workings of the empire. And this is even reflected in the temples. Many Roman religious buildings were directly inspired by Greek architecture, but with adaptations that reveal this new mentality. Doric columns, triangular pediments, marble, sculptures, all of these were incorporated, but with a more austere aesthetic, more focused on the grandeur of the state than on idealized beauty. Roman religious art didn't just seek to enchant, it sought to assert its presence, mark its territory, and make clear that Rome was the rightful heir to Greek wisdom, but with a new guise. This journey of fusion between Rome and Greece is a powerful example of how cultures transform when they encounter one another. And more than that, it shows how mythology can be used as a tool for building collective identity. The Romans didn't copy the Greeks out of a lack of creativity. They reinterpreted them with purpose. Each adaptation was a conscious choice, an affirmation of values, a way of saying, "We are different, but we recognize what is valuable in you." Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding this fusion isn't just about comparing the names of gods, it's about seeing behind the scenes of a civilization that knew how to use symbols to consolidate power, inspire loyalty, and create a narrative that would span centuries. And when we begin to perceive these details, everything changes. The way we look at a statue, a temple, a name carved in stone, everything takes on new layers of meaning. Comment below, "This makes sense to me," just so I know you're on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding how Rome adapted the Greek gods isn't just a matter of different names. It's about how each civilization projected its values onto the divine figures it chose to worship. And when we place Jupiter and Zeus side by side, for example, the first impression might be that we're looking at the same character with a different translation. But one only needs to observe closely to realize that there is a subtle, almost strategic transformation that reveals a lot about the Roman mentality. Zeus, in Greek mythology, is a god endowed with traits of passion, impulsiveness, and even a certain vulnerability. He is the lord of Olympus, yes, but he is also embroiled in family dramas, turbulent romances, and decisions that don't always seem rational. Jupiter, his Roman counterpart, is more restrained, more austere, and more connected to order and justice. He doesn't appear as an emotional figure, but rather as a symbol of stability and authority. This difference isn't just narrative. It directly impacts how the Roman people viewed power. Jupiter isn't just the king of the gods. He is the idealized reflection of the emperor, the Senate, and the law that sustains the empire. And this logic repeats itself in other divine pairs. Mars, for example, is the Roman god of war, and his image is completely different from that of Ares, his Greek counterpart. Ares was seen by the Greeks as a chaotic, violent god, even despised by other gods for his destructive nature. Mars, on the other hand, was revered, respected, almost venerated as a hero. He represented courage, military discipline, and duty to the country. This shift in profile is no coincidence. It is a clear revelation of how Rome used its gods to reinforce social values. War for the Romans was not an impulse, it was a mission, and Mars embodied this mission with honor. Venus and Aphrodite also illustrate this transformation well. In Greek mythology, Aphrodite is the goddess of love, beauty, and seduction. She is involved in stories of desire, jealousy, and rivalry. Venus, while east, maintaining her association with love and beauty, gains a much stronger political and symbolic dimension. She is considered an ancestor of the Roman people, directly linked to the founding of Rome through Aeneas, a character in Virgil's Aeneid. Venus is not just a goddess of love, she is the mother of the nation, and this completely changes the impact of her figure within Roman culture. These subtle differences in personality and function show that mythology is not static. It adapts to the needs of those who worship it. And when Rome decided to adopt the Greek gods, it didn't do so out of blind admiration. It was a strategic decision, a way to absorb Greece's cultural prestige, while simultaneously shaping these symbols to serve its own purposes. It's as if each god had passed through a Roman filter, gaining new contours, new responsibilities, new meanings. This journey of transformation reveals a hidden truth about the power of narratives. They don't just tell stories, they shape mindsets. And when we begin to see behind the scenes of these adaptations, everything takes on a new dimension. The gods cease to be mere mythological figures and become tools of cultural construction, fundamental pieces in the symbolic architecture of an empire that knew exactly how to harness the collective imagination to solidify its identity. Right there, I'm on this journey too, just so I know you're following this discovery with the same curiosity. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we look at how Rome molded the Greek gods in its image, what emerges is a silent but powerful transformation. It wasn't just a change of names, it was a shift in personality, function, and purpose. The Romans had a mindset focused on order, utility, and collective impact, and this was directly reflected in how they reinterpreted the gods they inherited from Greece. Ares, for example, was seen by the Greeks as a god of war, yes, but also as an unstable, impulsive, even unwanted figure. He represented the chaotic side of conflict, blood spilled without honor, violence unchecked. Mars, his Roman equivalent, was elevated to a completely different level. Mars was not just the god of war, he was the guardian of military virtue, the symbol of patriotism, discipline, and the courage that builds empires. This shift is not merely aesthetic, it reveals a hidden truth about how Rome viewed war, not as a necessary evil, but as a legitimate expression of strength and order. And this pattern repeats itself. The Romans didn't want gods who were merely mythological characters. They wanted figures who represented decisions, values, and structures. Mythology began to serve the state, and the gods became pieces on a political and symbolic chessboard. Venus, for example, ceased to be merely the goddess of love and beauty to become the mother of the Roman people. Directly linked to Aeneas's lineage, she gained a role of ancestry, of historical legitimacy. It was as if the empire itself had been blessed from the beginning by a deity who represented not only desire, but also continuity and protection. This transformation reveals the hidden depths of a culture that knew how to use symbols with precision. The Greek gods, with their human passions and personal dramas, were adapted to fit a more rigid, functional narrative. Rome needed gods who inspired respect, who reinforced authority, who served as role models, and so, many of the more human and contradictory characteristics of the Greek deities were softened or replaced with more stable, predictable traits, more aligned with the Roman mentality. The impact of this is profound. When we look at the art, rituals, and texts that have survived, we realize that the Roman gods were not just worshipped, they were utilized. Every temple, every statue, every ceremony had a clear purpose: to reinforce the presence of the state, legitimize the power of rulers, and maintain social cohesion. Religion was not merely spiritual, it was strategic. And the gods, in this context, became tools of cultural transformation. This journey of adaptation shows how Rome knew how to make decisions that went beyond military force. By molding the gods in its image, the empire constructed a mythology that not only reflected its values, but imposed them. It was a way to educate the people, to consolidate collective identity, to ensure that each citizen knew exactly what to expect and what was expected of them. The gods ceased to be distant figures and became living archetypes, present in everyday life, in laws, in battles, in celebrations. Comment below, "This makes sense to me," just so I know that this transformation also made you see the gods in a different light. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we talk about cultural fusions between Rome and Greece, we're not just dealing with isolated adaptations, we're dealing with true symbolic engineering. The Romans not only reinterpreted the Greek gods, but also fused these figures with local deities, creating hybrids that carried both the power of tradition and political functionality. This process of syncretism wasn't improvised. It was a conscious, strategic decision that reveals the inner workings of a civilization that knew exactly how to use the imagination to consolidate power and identity. One of the most intriguing cases is that of Apollo. Unlike other Greek gods who underwent significant transformations, upon being absorbed by Rome, Apollo was adopted virtually unchanged. His name, his attributes, his myths, everything remained virtually intact. And this raises a question that goes beyond the surface. Why was Apollo, among so many, preserved so faithfully? The answer lies in the Roman mindset and the impact certain symbols had on it. Apollo represented light, reason, balance, healing, art, values the Romans deeply admired and that fit perfectly into the narrative the empire wanted to construct. He didn't need to be reformed because he was already functional. He was already useful. He was already, in a way, Roman. This kind of fusion reveals a hidden truth about how the Romans dealt with the divine. They were not attached to religious purity, but rather to symbolic utility. If a local deity had characteristics similar to those of a Greek god, it was fused, reinterpreted, and renamed. The goal was not to preserve originality, but to create a network of meanings that was comprehensible, efficient, and politically advantageous. It was a journey of transformation where the sacred became a tool, and where every mythological decision carried profound social and cultural implications. In conquered regions, this syncretism was even more evident. Celtic, Etruscan, and Egyptian gods all were, at some point, associated with figures from the Greco-Roman pantheon. This facilitated the integration of conquered peoples, created bridges between cultures, and reinforced the idea that Rome was the legitimate center of a universal order. Religion ceased to be merely a matter of belief and became a matter of politics, diplomacy, and strategy. And the gods, in this scenario, were ambassadors of a new imperial mentality. This process also had a direct impact on art and architecture. Statues of gods with blended features, temples dedicated to hybrid deities, inscriptions combining names and attributes, all of this demonstrates how cultural fusion was visible, palpable, and present in everyday life. And more than that, it shows how Rome knew how to transform what was diverse into something cohesive, functional, and powerful. Mythology became a common language, a way to unify without erasing, to dominate without destroying, to absorb without losing control. This ability to fuse cultures through gods is one of the reasons the Roman Empire managed to survive for so long. Rather than imposing a single, rigid religion, it offered a flexible, adaptable structure capable of accommodating different beliefs under a single system. This not only facilitated governance but also created a sense of belonging. Conquered peoples saw their gods reflected in the Roman gods, and this made domination less hostile, more subtle, and more effective. Right there, I'm on this journey too, just so I know you're following this revelation with the same curiosity and desire to understand what's behind the stories that shape the world. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we understand that mythology wasn't just a collection of fantastical stories, but a powerful political tool, everything changes perspective. What once seemed merely symbolic begins to reveal calculated decisions, power strategies, and an imperial mindset that knew exactly how to manipulate the collective imagination. The gods weren't just on the altars, they were in the speeches, on the coins, in the sculptures, in the decisions that shaped the destiny of Rome. And among all, the emperors who knew how to use this resource masterfully, Augustus stands out as a true architect of political divinity. He didn't just rule, he constructed a narrative. And in this narrative, Apollo wasn't just a solar god, he was a reflection of the very light Augustus wanted to project upon his reign. The association between the two was no accident. Augustus chose Apollo because he represented order, reason, art, and healing, all things that contrasted with the chaos of the civil wars that had ravaged Rome before his accession. By linking himself to Apollo, Augustus wasn't just seeking divine legitimacy. He was offering the people a promise of rebirth, of balance, of a new, enlightened age. It was a masterstroke, where mythology became propaganda, and the divine became an extension of the human. This choice had a direct impact on the city's architecture. The Temple of Apollo Palatinus, built by order of Augustus, was not just a religious space, it was a political symbol. Strategically located near his residence, the temple created a visual and symbolic connection between the emperor and the god. It was as if, when looking at the temple, the people saw Augustus reflected in the figure of Apollo. This fusion of sacred space and earthly power revealed a hidden truth about the workings of the empire. Religion was shaped to serve the official narrative, and the gods were summoned to legitimize human decisions. But it wasn't just Apollo. Other emperors followed this same path, associating themselves with specific deities to reinforce their public image. Vespasian, for example, approached Jupiter, the king of the gods, to consolidate his authority after the turbulent year of the four emperors. Hadrian, with his passion for Greek culture, linked himself to figures like Athena and Dionysus, reinforcing his image as a philosopher, emperor, and patron of the arts. Each choice revealed an intention, a construction of identity, an attempt to shape public perception through mythology. And this wasn't limited to temples or speeches. Roman coins, which circulated throughout the empire, were veritable vehicles of divine propaganda. On them, it was common to see the emperor's face flanked by symbols of gods, or even representations of the emperor himself as a semi-divine figure. These images weren't decorative, they were messages. Messages that said, "This man is more than human. He is chosen, enlightened, guided by the gods." It was a way to consolidate power, without words, using only the visual and symbolic impact of mythology. This strategy also manifested itself in public ceremonies. The triumphs, the festivals, the rituals, all were carefully choreographed to reinforce the connection between the emperor and the divine. When Augustus celebrated the Pax Romana, he wasn't just celebrating peace. He was enacting a narrative in which he was the mediator between gods and men, the one responsible for restoring cosmic order. It was a political performance, with symbolic depth, where every gesture carried hidden meanings, and every choice revealed a journey of power and transformation. And it's curious to see how this mentality has endured for centuries. Even after the fall of the Roman Empire, the idea that leaders should have a connection with the divine continued to influence other cultures, religions, and forms of government. Medieval kings claimed to be chosen by God. Modern leaders still use religious symbols to reinforce their narratives. Mythology, in this sense, has never ceased to be a political tool. It has simply changed its form, name, and context. What becomes clear is that Roman emperors were not just rulers. They were masters of narrative. They understood that power was not sustained solely by armies or laws, but by symbols, stories, and images that captured the collective imagination. And by associating themselves with the gods, they were not merely seeking legitimacy, they were shaping reality itself, creating a version of the world where their presence was inevitable, necessary, almost sacred. This revelation changes everything, because it shows us that mythology isn't just history, it's structure, it's language, it's a tool, and when we begin to see behind the scenes, we begin to understand how seemingly symbolic decisions can have real, profound, and lasting impact. Augustus's journey with Apollo wasn't just an aesthetic choice, it was a transformation of mindset, a redefinition of what it means to govern, to lead, to influence. Write down, "This makes sense to me," just so I know you're following this journey with the same curiosity and desire to understand what's behind the stories that shape the world. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we compare how the Greeks and Romans worshiped their gods, we're not just observing religious differences, we're revealing two completely different mindsets about the divine, power, and the role of the individual in the cosmos. It's as if we're facing two stages, one where ritual is spectacle, emotion, and catharsis, and another where worship is protocol, duty, and functionality. And understanding this difference is like opening a window behind the scenes of two civilizations that shaped the world in opposite but equally impactful ways. In Greece, rituals were almost an extension of art. Everything was designed to provoke sensations, engage the senses, and create an aesthetic and spiritual experience at the same time. Festivals honoring Dionysus, for example, combined theater, music, dance, and wine. It wasn't just a religious celebration, it was a collective emotional journey. The Greeks believed that by participating in these rituals, they were connecting with higher powers, transcending everyday reality, and accessing hidden truths about existence. It was a form of transformation, where the individual dissolved into the experience and emerged renewed, touched by the divine. In Rome, the approach was different. Rituals were essentially pragmatic. The focus was not on emotion, but on effectiveness. Roman worship was a kind of contract with the gods. If the rites were performed correctly, the gods would grant protection, prosperity, and stability. It was a relationship of exchange, almost administrative. Every gesture, every word, every offering had to follow a strict protocol, because a mistake could invalidate the entire ritual. And this reveals a lot about the Roman mentality. They didn't seek spiritual ecstasy. They sought order, predictability, and control. Religion was a tool for maintaining the system, not an escape from it. This difference also manifested itself in temple architecture. The Greeks built open spaces with columns that allowed for integration between the sacred and the outside world. It was as if the temple were an extension of nature, a place where the divine manifested itself through beauty and harmony. The Romans, on the other hand, preferred closed, monumental structures with dark, controlled interiors. The Roman temple was more like a vault. It guarded power, isolated mystery, and reinforced authority. It was a space of dominion, not contemplation. And when we look at public worship, this difference intensifies. In Greece, festivals were moments of communion, where people gathered to celebrate, reflect, and be moved. There was room for improvisation, individual expression, and active participation. In Rome, public worship was official, events often organized by the state, with well-defined political functions. The goal was to reinforce unity, discipline, and the continuity of institutions. The ritual was not about the individual, it was about the collective, about the imperial machine functioning with precision. But this doesn't mean the Romans didn't believe in the gods. On the contrary, they deeply respected them. This respect, however, was accompanied by an almost legal logic. The gods were powerful entities, yes, but also predictable. As long as they were treated with due protocol, it was like dealing with higher authorities. You didn't have to love them, but you did have to follow the rules. And this shows how deeply intertwined Roman religion was with the power structure, with the idea that everything, even the divine, could be managed. This difference between theatricality and pragmatism also reveals something about how each people viewed their own existence. The Greeks valued experience, drama, and intensity. For them, life was about launching oneself into the unknown, exploring limits and seeking meaning. The Romans, on the other hand, valued stability, order, and permanence. For them, life was about fulfilling a role, maintaining balance, and protecting one's legacy. And religious rituals were a direct reflection of this worldview. Write down, "This makes sense to me," just so I know you're following this journey with the same curiosity and desire to understand what's behind the stories that shape the world. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we look at art and architecture that have survived the test of time, we're not just looking at stone, marble, or paint. We're looking at decisions that reveal a mindset, an intention, a way of seeing the world and shaping it through aesthetics. And this is where the mythological fusion between Rome and Greece becomes visible, almost palpable. The temples, the sculptures, the frescoes, everything bears traces of this symbolic blend, where the sacred and the political intertwine in a visual narrative that still impacts us today. The Romans, in absorbing Greek mythology, didn't just copy the gods, they copied the styles as well. And this is evident in the architecture of the temples. Just look at the Temple of Venus in Roma, for example. The monumental structure, with Corinthian columns and classical proportions, is a direct homage to the Greek style. But the content, the purpose, the symbolism, everything is Roman. It's as if Rome had clothed Greek aesthetics with its own soul. And this choice wasn't merely decorative, it was a statement, a way of saying, we dominate not only the territories, but also the symbols, and now they belong to us. This fusion also appears in sculptures. Many Roman statues depict Greek gods with Roman features. In other words, the body is inspired by Hellenistic models, idealized musculature, elegant posture, serene expression, but the face bears the features of emperors, generals, and public figures. It's a blend that reveals a hidden truth. The Romans didn't just want to represent the divine, they wanted to embody it. They wanted to transform the political body into a mythical body. And this had a profound impact on how power was perceived. The emperor wasn't just a man, he was a living sculpture, an image molded to appear eternal, illuminated, almost sacred. And it doesn't stop there. Frescoes found in Roman villas, such as Pompeii and Herculaneum, depict mythological scenes with a creative freedom that blends styles, narratives, and interpretations. It's common to see Apollo with attributes that didn't originally belong to him, or Venus depicted with elements of Isis, the Egyptian goddess. This blending wasn't an error, it was intentional. It was a way of adapting the myth to the local reality, of creating a visual language that was understandable, functional, and impactful. It was art as a tool for integration, as a bridge between worlds, as an expression of a new symbolic order. And it's fascinating to see how this aesthetic shaped Roman identity itself. Public spaces were filled with images that reinforced this fusion. Fountains with sculptures of hybrid gods, squares surrounded by Greek columns, palaces decorated with reinterpreted mythological scenes. All of this created an atmosphere in which Roman citizens felt part of something greater, a narrative that blended past and present, tradition and innovation, human and divine. It was an aesthetic journey that reinforced the empire's political and spiritual journey. This aesthetic choice also reveals a profound transformation in the way the Romans dealt with time. By adopting the Greek style, they weren't just paying homage to the past, they were attempting to immortalize it. They were creating a symbolic continuity between the glory of Athens and the greatness of Rome. And by fusing the gods, the styles, and the symbols, they were saying that the empire wasn't just a territorial conquest, it was a cultural conquest, an absorption of everything that came before, transformed into something new, functional, and powerful. Right there, I'm on this journey too, just so I know you're following this revelation with the same curiosity and desire to understand what's behind the stories that shape the world. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we talk about mythology, we're not just revisiting ancient stories, we're deciphering the codes that still shape our imagination, our narratives, our decisions today. The Greco-Roman mythological legacy wasn't confined to temples, sculptures, or rituals. It spanned the centuries, infiltrating art, literature, science, and pop culture. And the curious thing is that even without realizing it, we continue to live within this symbolic structure that began way back when, among marble columns and sunset sacrifices. Think about the names of the planets in our solar system. Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn. They all bear the names of Roman gods. And this wasn't a random choice. It was a way of giving identity to the unknown. of transforming celestial bodies into characters, of creating a bridge between the cosmos and mythology. When astronomers named these planets, they were doing more than naming. They were perpetuating a worldview in which the universe is inhabited by archetypal forces, by entities that represent war, love, wisdom, and time. It's as if, even in science, mythology remains a valid language, a tool for understanding. And this pattern repeats itself in pop culture. Films like Percy Jackson, Clash of the Titans, Troy, and Gladiator all explore this mythological universe with a modern twist, but with deep roots. The gods remain central characters. The heroes still face moral dilemmas. The monsters continue to symbolize inner fears. And audiences respond to this not because they're fans of ancient history, but because these narratives touch something essential, something that resides in the collective unconscious. It's as if, by watching these stories, we're accessing an ancestral memory, a hidden truth that continues to pulse beneath the surface of modernity. In books, the pattern is the same. Authors like Rick Riordan, Madeline Miller, Stephen Fry all reinterpret myths with contemporary language, but without losing their symbolic depth. And this shows that mythology isn't static. It transforms, adapts, renews itself, and, more than that, it remains relevant. Because the dilemmas it presents, power, destiny, identity, sacrifice, are still our dilemmas. Ulysses' journey, for example, isn't just about returning home. It's about resisting temptation, facing the unknown, maintaining one's essence in the face of adversity. And who hasn't experienced something like that? This influence is even evident in games. Games like God of War, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and Hades delve deeply into this universe, blending action with mythology, strategy with symbolism. And what makes these games so engaging isn't just the gameplay. It's the symbolic weight of the choices, the characters, the settings. It's the feeling of participating in something larger, in a narrative that transcends time. And that's powerful, because it shows that even in digital environments, mythology remains a tool for impact, transformation, and connection. And it doesn't stop there. Advertising, fashion, music, everything bears traces of this legacy. Brands that use the names of gods, campaigns that evoke archetypes, collections inspired by mythological figures. It's as if, even without realizing it, we continue to draw on these symbols to give meaning, value, and depth to things. And this reveals a truth that many people ignore. Mythology isn't about the past. It's about the present. It's about how we construct meaning, how we position ourselves in the world, how we understand what it means to be human. Right here. Comment. Here. This makes sense to me. Just so I know you're following this journey with the same curiosity and desire to understand what's behind the stories that shape the world. If you've made it this far, you've already realized that this dive into mythology isn't just about gods and temples. It's about understanding the underbelly of our own culture, the invisible roots that still influence the way we think, feel, and create. And if this content has brought you some clarity, a spark of curiosity, or that feeling of now everything makes more sense, then it's worth continuing this journey with me. Take advantage and subscribe to the channel, not out of obligation, but because here we'll continue unraveling these hidden layers of history, art, and the human mindset. And if this video connected with you in any way, leave a like. It's just a gesture, but it helps keep this space alive, pulsating, and full of exchanges that truly make sense. Oh, and comment. I'm with you until the end, just so I know you stayed with me in this conversation until the last detail, absorbing every revelation. There's a video here that complements this topic. Click and continue with me there. The next piece of this puzzle is already waiting for you.